Hey Hexers, this is Function here, bringing you another video. This time, I've got a deck tech featuring my Blood and Sapphire tap-out control deck, which I'm calling Bruiser Control. It's my black and blue Bruiser Brew. Try saying that 5 times fast, I dare ya. I'll give you a disclaimer right off the bat, the control deck needs to be tailored to the threats. If you use a static deck list and never change it, you're only hurting yourself. An aggro deck, like the one I posted in my first video, is unlikely to need to warp itself dramatically based on the metagame. This deck has many cards which could be adjusted based on the meta, but I feel like it's a strong control shell, and it's a pretty good starting point. With that said, let's get to the deck breakdown, which can also be found in the link below. After that, we'll do a card-by-card walkthrough. So here's the deck list. Like I said, click on the link below and you'll find it. We're running 17 blood sources, 8 sapphire sources, that's 25 sources total. We're running 3 journeyman technician, 2 bone warrior, 4 Zombie Plague, 2 Sapper's Charge, 4 Murder, 4 Oracle Song, 4 Vampire King, 4 Zarlox the Brood Lord, 3 Hex Engines, 3 Extinction, and 2 Urunaz. Alright, with that said, the goal of this deck is to play all the cards with the best art. No, I wouldn't do that to you guys. It just happened this time on accident. So, first off, the deck list, like I said, we have 17 blood resources and 8 sapphires. That's going to be the first thing to change as soon as we have an official spoiler of a non-basic resource. I showed one in my previous video. I expect that we'll see one where it gives both blood and sapphire thresholds, and that would be auto-include, putting 4 of it right in there. And I didn't even say what the real goal of this deck is. The goal of this deck is to stabilize as early as possible and then end the game with flying troops. Anyhow, speaking of 4 auto-includes on the non-basic resource, why don't we start off with what the auto-includes are here. We've got 4 copies of Zarlox the Broodlord and 3 copies of Extinction. These are some of the more powerful cards spoiled so far, and one of the primary reasons that we're going heavily into blood. Our goal is to play as many of the most powerful cards as possible. Zarlox is a 4 resource, 2 blood threshold troop. He's got 2 attack and 4 defense, which makes him quite the strong blocker. Where he gets particularly appealing though, is that when he enters play, he may destroy target troop with cost 3 or less. You're getting a huge board and card advantage when you play this guy on turn 4. In most matchups, your games will likely hinge around what you accomplish on turn 4. If this becomes the most important factor for us, we could easily cut 1 or 2 more cards and increase our resource count, which also in turn increases the chances that we'll have 4 resources on turn 4. It's somewhat odd that Zarlox has a specific name, but he's not considered a unique card. That could definitely change. But yeah, if he's unique, normally it would be right here, and it would say unique, and it would mean you can only have 1 in play at a time. Anyhow, the other card is Extinction, which is a 5 resource, 2 blood threshold basic action, meaning that it can only be played during your own main phase. The text on this card is only 3 words long, but they are 3 of the most powerful words in any card game. Destroy all troops. Oh. This includes your own troops, but you are the one choosing when to play it. So for the most part, it's all upside. Before I move on though, look at how intense this art is. Like the guy with his eyes coming out and this guy with his face getting blown off. The art is brutal. Yeah, anyhow. Okay, so let's move on to the next ones. We're also here looking at playing 4 copies of Murder and 4 copies of Zombie Plague. I'll start off with Murder since it's much more straightforward. Murder is a 3 cost, 1 blood threshold quick action, meaning it can be played at any point where you have priority. It doesn't get much simpler than destroy target troop, and once you've got a 3-word, and once again, you've got a 3-word phrase that you don't want to be on the receiving end of. I will say, however, that Murder does not feel like the strongest removal option from what we've seen so far, and expect that to maybe be one of the topics of one of my upcoming videos. It may be versatile and then it can solve most problems, but it also costs 3 resources, which means it's a little on the slower side. With that said, only have 1 threshold cost rather than 2 does make it fairly splashable with other colors. The second card here is quite a doozy. Even with the higher resolution, it might still be difficult to read all the text. Zombie Plague is a 2-cost, 2-blood threshold constant, meaning that you can play it during your own main phase, and once you do, it stays in play until someone interferes with it. At the start of your turn, add a plague counter to this constant. Then reveal a random troop from each opposing champion's deck for each plague counter on this constant. Did I read that right? Yeah, I didn't even notice that till now. It's each opposing champion's deck, so if you're playing multiplayer, it hits both of them. Anyhow, it's a... Let's backtrack a second. At the start of your turn, add a plague counter to this constant. Then reveal a random troop for each opposing champion's deck for each plague counter on this constant. Those troops get a permanent -1/-1. If a troop's defense is reduced to 0 in this way, revert it, transform it into a zombie, and put it into play under your own control. Once this card gets going, you will constantly be building an army of zombies, which are 2/2 troops that leave the game entirely when they are destroyed. You're stripping the troops from your opponent's deck, and the ones that remain are weakened forever. Talk about inevitability. One of the things you always want to build in a control deck is inevitability, meaning that if the game keeps drawing longer and longer, you are more likely to win. This is definitely a card that gets you there. It's very possible that Zombie Plague is potentially not an effective card. It could just turn out to be completely awful. It's a strange interaction which many TCG players are not used to. This is something we haven't really seen before in physical card games. One of the reasons I love Hex. We won't know for sure until we have some hands-on time with it. I will say, though, in some matchups, playing Zombie Plague on turn 2 will be the stone cold nuts. Game over, move on to the next round. You win. Anyways, for now, we'll just move on to the next screen. Here are the only 2 Sapphire cards that are currently in the deck. The Technician, who I've already mentioned in my most recent video, is a 1-cost, 1 Sapphire troop with 1 attack and 1 defense. He serves 2 roles. He can either be an early chump blocker that trades with most of the aggressive 1 and 2 drops, or he can fill the more important role of enabling our turn 4 plays. Turn 4 is very important for us. It is the critical point in our game plan, and if we don't do something big, whether it's a Broodlord or an Extinction, we may be in trouble. Oh, what's that you say? An Extinction has cost of 5, and we're talking about turn 4? Well, I'll get to that, don't you worry. The other card here also helps enable our turn 4 plays as well. It gives us more reach, and it gives us more reach in the long game, and then potentially draws us into what we want to be playing on turn 4. The other card is Oracle Song. It's a little blurry, but it's got 3 resource cost, 1 blue threshold. It's a basic action, and it says target champion draws 2 cards. Pretty straightforward. We're getting close to the finish line here, and there's 2 more cards that are somewhat borderline. They might not make the deck at all, but they could turn out to be completely critical to it. Bone Warrior is a 2-cost, 2-blood threshold troop with 1 power and 2 defense. He's really here to slow an opposing aggressive deck's early game. When it dies, it turns into a pile of bones and stays in play, which can then be reverted back into a Bone Warrior by paying 4 resources. So the goal with Bone Warrior here is really to block, trade, kind of, with an opposing guy, because most of the early 1 or 2 drops in the aggressive decks only have 1 toughness anyways, so this guy trades with him, but he stays in play as a pile of bones, and you bring him back by paying the cost later. Potentially, he could also survive through Extinction, remain in play, which is something very uncommon with sweeper effects. He remains in play, you bring him back in as a Bone Warrior, and then you can start attacking. He's only got 1 power, but sometimes that 1 power matters. Alright, so the next card is Sapphire's Charge. Sapphire's Charge is an artifact with 2 cost, which is reduced to 1 if we have a Technician in play. This leads to us playing it on turn 2 and activating it the same turn to sacrifice it and deal 2 damage to an opposing champion, or more likely a troop. This is here to remove problematic early creatures, maybe ones that aren't necessarily attacking, and much like the Skeleton, it might not actually belong in the main deck. Both of these cards could very potentially be strictly sideboard material for those early aggressive decks. Even though both these cards are fairly interchangeable, they do serve slightly different roles. Finally, let's move on to our win conditions. We're running 4 copies of Vampire King and 2 copies of Uranaz. That name's kind of underwhelming. Maybe it should be Uranaz the Dragon Lord, or I don't know, the Dragon Lord of Kickstarter, something awesome. No. Anyhow, Vampire King is a 4-cost, 2-blood threshold troop with flight, meaning that he can only be blocked by other creatures that have flight. So long as he is on the board, when an opposing troop dies, you transform it into a vampire, which is a 2/2 flyer, and put it into play under your own control. Next up is our real game ender, Uranaz, which is a whopping 7 resources and 3 blood threshold. It's a 5/5 flyer, and when it or another troop comes into play, target champion buries cards from the top of their deck equal to the cost of that troop. You can potentially target yourself with this if there were some sort of shenanigans, perhaps to bring back creatures from your own graveyard, although that would be a completely different deck. Finally, when he connects with enemy champions in combat, you pick a troop from the graveyard and put it into play. This guy is definitely highly costed, but he also has the potential to wreck face in endgames quickly. It would be much nicer if the cost was only 6, because then you would mean that we could potentially play him as early as turn 4. Unfortunately, that's not the case. Alright, so here is the final piece of the puzzle, Hex Engine. Now in my last video I talked about resource acceleration, and somehow I overlooked Hex Engine. I think it was just a very brief window that it was even shown on the Twitch stream, but here it is, I have it for you. This doohickey is a 4-cost artifact. It comes into play exhausted, but once it is ready, you can turn it sideways to gain 2 temporary resources. I would rate this slightly higher than Surge Mechanism, which I talked about in my previous video. It would be even better if it had a 2-cost and granted 1 resource instead. Then we'd be playing it as a 4 of, no doubt, just hands down, and we'd be cutting the Technician probably entirely. Currently, however, we can play a Technician on either turn 1 or 2, and then spit this machine out on turn 3, which could then enable a turn 4 Extinction or a Dragon on turn 5. Playing 3 copies may be greedy. I'd be a bit more comfortable if we could change the Vampire Kings out for maybe a 5 or 6 costed win condition, or bring in a variable cost action card. I feel like we're maybe not quite getting the value out of Hex Engine that we could, but it's also a card I really want to be playing. Maybe it's just the resource cost feels too high. We'll see though. Now that we've gone over the whole deck, I'll very briefly mention some sideboard and alternate options. So here's the 6 that I was primarily considering. We have Archmage Renlock, who could be extremely powerful in conjunction with Hex Engine. I expect that I'll try to build a deck where we move out of blood entirely and use Sapphire, splashing Ruby. We could call it Blueberry Splash, like all those juice drinks or something. Archmage Renlock would be a key player, and he's not drinking any ordinary Kool-Aid. Anyhow, maybe that'll be a deck if people want me to, if people make the request for it, right? I've been tossing a few other ideas around though, so we'll see. Next up, there's Corrupt Harvester, in case we feel the need to be gaining health back. Relentless Corruption, which seems like an easy sideboard card for the mirror. We definitely have some cards that are completely dead in the mirror. Void Leech, which may fit in if we wanted to go for more of a draw go control style. If we're going to do that, we'd be bringing in counters, or I guess they're going to probably be called interrupts. We haven't seen any spoiled other than Void Leech, but it leads me to believe that there's going to be some. I would have to guess maybe we'd see a a blue threshold, 3 resource cost, interrupt, target card, 1. So if we were going for more of that draw-go style, Void Leech would be pretty interesting, considering with the Hex Engine, we could play Void Leech on turn 2, or not turn 2, we could play it on turn 4, but still have the interrupt mana up. That would definitely be a decent play. It's only, I mean, it's still kind of a weak flyer, but it seems like a decent enough play that it might be worthwhile. What else we got? We got Omen of Oblivion, which seems targeted strictly at combo decks. It's got an interesting effect, but it's very slow. It's really only if you're trying to get a specific card out of their deck. And if they're playing combo, it's probably pretty likely that this will be effective. The last one of the 6 is the Kraken. Yeah, so the Kraken is pretty cool. I really like it. Definitely it gets the little kid in me all excited about the huge, big dumb creature, but it's got a really powerful effect. I think it's pretty interesting. It's just really highly costed. 8 is an awful lot to be paying. and making it work would take its own individual deck specifically targeted to make Kraken work. I might try that too. Gotta unleash the Kraken. Alright, so now that I've gone over all the deck, I'll mention the elephant in the room, which is Pact of Pain. So here's Pact of Pain. I'll read the card because it is pretty relevant. It's a 2 resource, 2 blood threshold card. It's a constant, so it stays in play. After you've played it at any time, you can pay 2 resources, pay 2 health, and draw a card. At first, that might not seem like the most powerful effect to new players. This is an extremely powerful card. It's easy to see why it's giving you a huge source of cards to draw. It's not very good in multiples, but really once you get in play, multiples aren't going to be too much of an issue because you can draw quite a few cards. My goal here though with this deck was to build a tap out deck, and I really feel like this card wasn't necessarily a good fit for that style deck. For a much cheaper investment, you get pretty much the same, if not better, value out of Oracle Song, which was the 3 cost draw 2 cards. In this case, to get 2 cards out, you have to pay a total of 6 resources, 6 health, and you're only getting 2 cards. It just doesn't, it feels kind of clunky to me. It's still a really good start card. With that said, I can definitely acknowledge Pact of Pain might be the most powerful card spoiled so far. It has a ton of potential, just not in the deck I built. Well, that's the conclusion of my video. Thanks to everybody who's been watching. I hope you've enjoyed them so far. Please subscribe if you haven't already. I mean, it means a lot to me and helps me stay motivated to keep turning out quality content for you. And just for that, let's see if I can do it. Black and blue Bruiser brew, 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 black and blue Bruiser brew. See, I did it 5 times fast, so that was the very first try. 1 take. That's awesome. I'm super proud of myself. Anyways, less fail, more function.